Today on the podcast, we're speaking to one of my favorite people in the world, AJ Amyx. Now, AJ has had a really profound impact on my life. He's coached me, he's been a great friend, he's mentored and helped me to overcome many of my business blockages and see things that I couldn't, and he gave me pretty profound insights and systems and ways of being that have served me perhaps more than any other tactic, definitely more than any tactic. He's really taught me principles and ways to communicate. AJ is one of the best communicators I've ever met in my life. He's so good and so quick at capturing the energy of the scenario. And for that reason, I believe he's a world-class coach. He's a world-class business mentor, and he is amazing when it comes to producing results. And the reason is, he is able to peer beneath the surface. He's able to go deeper than the typical route, right? He's able to really embed himself in these deep spiritual philosophies. And you'll see throughout the episode, he's quoting the Bible and he's quoting certain philosophers, but he doesn't get caught up in any of that stuff. He's so grounded as a spiritual leader. And I think this is what I really love about AJ, is he's a really balanced person and he's an amazing guy. I really enjoyed this podcast. Now, if you do enjoy it, please give us a like here and share the episode if anyone you feel needs to hear this message today, because this is a message that doesn't necessarily get shared very often in the sort of circles that we work in, right? It's all about Facebook ads. It's all about messenger bots. It's all about the tactics. Whereas this deep personal work that we're going to talk about on the episode today is what I believe to be the number one thing that you want to learn and master when it comes to your business. It's what I've consistently seen again and again and again. It's the people that can do the real work who really thrive. And I think this is why AJ and myself get along so well and have become such great friends, because we have very similar processes in terms of what we believe about the two sides, the yin and the yang of business growth and fulfillment on your journey. Now, as a call to action, AJ, as I mentioned, works with our highest performing clients. If you resonate with AJ, definitely reach out to me at systemsforbusiness.ai. Click the link and book in a call with me, because AJ actually coaches many of our clients. He takes them through our Systems for Business education portal. And like I said, he's one of the best in the world. When I have an issue in my life, when I have something that I'm stumped with or a blockage that I know is there, he is the first person that I will reach out to. He's the first person that I'll ask. And it's pretty amazing to have someone like that in your corner. So if you resonate with the principles, the message that AJ is sharing, we can combine this deep personal work with all the systems, the strategies, and the tactics that you need to be successful, and the principles. Like, this is really what I believe is quite unique about us at Systems for Business. We play both sides. We go deep into marketing, we go deep into sales, but we also go deep into the personal work. And like I said, this is why I believe AJ is so amazing at what he does, because he's such a rare individual. It takes a very rare person that can play both sides well and as well as he can. And I know you're going to love this episode. So let's dive in. AJ, welcome to the Systems for Business podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me on here. This sounds so official. It's like this amazing, brilliant talk show for established business owners who want to grow and scale their stuff. This is going to be fun. I'm excited about this conversation.
This is it. So AJ, the reason I wanted to get you on is because I believe you're one of the best people in the world at coaching and helping people with mindset. Really, I think you've helped me in so many different ways. I can't thank you enough for the help that you have given me. And really, I just wanted you to come on and help the people in our tribe, because I know how much value you can add. You're a very deep thinker. I think you can touch things very broadly from like a tactical level, but also from very principle and deep mindset base. I really want to cover the mindset stuff today because I think that's your genius. So where did it all begin? Where did all this start, this different level of thinking that you've brought to the marketplace?
So it's kind of weird because I've always been spiritual. Like, it's just part of who I am. So that's always like been within me, whether it's been like Christianity in church, whether that's been with psychics, whether it's been medicine journeys. Like I've experienced many, many paths up the mountain, and there's a lot more to explore. And I'm a bit obsessed with exploring the different paths and really trusting where I'm led. So that's just a part of me being me, like my creative expression, my purpose. But like bridging into like making this relevant into the game of business, when I was like, I saw the wave in 2010, like the end of 2010 coming into 2011, that social media was going to be a big deal for business owners. At the time, Mike Koenig's had a program called Social Media Marketing Machines, and he was talking about how there's this opportunity for people to be social media marketing managers. Now, this was before everybody and their mother would call themselves a social media marketing manager, right? This was like, I could see like this wave coming. And so I bought his program. I learned the basics of like lead gen, funnels, email marketing, and tying like organic social media into that, right? So I rode that wave. I built a business called A New Way to Market. That was a brilliant URL, by the way. I had to let go. Should have kept that one.
That is a good URL.
And so,
I didn't know you had this.
Yeah, newwaytomarket.com. And so that was my agency, but it was just me. I was just a solopreneur. So I got to where I had 23 businesses that I managed their entire social media, like their Facebook, their Twitter, their LinkedIn, wrote all the content, scheduled all the content. And I didn't know how to scale and hire people. I didn't understand the 6 pillars that you so brilliantly talk about within Lead Flow, which is amazing. And so what happened is I just started teaching and implementing. I burnt out. But the thing that really like brought the mindset into the game is I could see like strategically, here's the thing to do to win. Strategically, here is the path to generate leads. And again, there's multiple paths up the mountain, but it's pretty much like pick a path, nail the messaging, ship path, you generate leads. It's not that complicated. But the thing that frustrated me is like some of the people would get results, some people wouldn't. And I like results, as you know. And so I was like, why? Like, what's the difference here? Like they have the skill sets. What's going on? So that then led me like, oh, mindset. So then I dove down the rabbit hole of understanding mindset and changing our way of thinking and cognitive behavior therapy and all of that, the way that we think from a cognitive piece. And that then got me another breakthrough, start getting clients breakthroughs. But then there would be more walls that would hit and people would stall out. And I was like, well, what's holding them back? And then that brought me into like the spiritual component of the game, where I've like named it like this idea of body set, which is like the emotionality that we have, and learning how to stop like resisting things and healing our past, and like really becoming like in integrity with the totality of who we are. And then I've learned when we create from a foundation of that place and then bolt on the mindsets and bolt on the skill sets, man, people just like go up the mountain pretty darn quickly. I mean, even with Lead Flow, we've had clients go from like $40,000 a month to $65,000 a month. You've seen quantum leaps going from $20, $30, $40, $60,000 a month that were kind of ebbing and flowing to consistent, huge $80,000, $100,000 a month. You're tracking to continue to grow beyond that. And here's the best part. When we address the deep foundation, I call it core power, and we're creating from that place, when someone like you and the people listening to the show who are very smart and intelligent people apply the skill sets inside that foundation, they do have quantum leaps inside their business, and they produce results with a lot more ease. Doesn't mean that it's easy. It just means it's a lot less stressful, I guess is the only way I can put it. A lot more joy and a lot more freedom in their day-to-day of running their organization.
Love it. Love it. So you're saying there's a level even beyond mindset that's unique to the individual, and it's like a being piece that when you drop into, it's like a synchronization where all of the other things that you're trying to do, it's like you've got like a Russian doll. It's like the one in the very, very, very middle. And then you can put the other layers on top. And if you want to go and generate leads, that it's most powerful to perhaps address this being piece as well.
Yeah. So it's kind of like riding a bicycle, right? Like if we're in the game of entrepreneurship, we all have a top of the mountain that we're working on ascending to. And the top of the mountain is different things for different people. Some people want to make $10,000 a month. Some people want to make $100,000 a month. Some people want to make a business where they can sell it and exit the business. And there's no right or wrong. It's just like, hey, this is the top of the mountain in which I'm hiking and attempting to ascend. Unfortunately, most people are riding this bicycle essentially with one pedal. So there's two pedals to this bicycle of like what I'll call the bicycle of purpose and profits. There's the pedal of doing, which the Western culture, even in Australia, is so adept to, which is like do the thing, do the thing, do the thing. The skill sets, the strategy, do the thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's another pedal that the Eastern philosophy and the Eastern cultures have really mastered for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, they are masters at it, which is the being pedal, right? And so oftentimes these entrepreneurs are attempting to go up their chosen mountain with one pedal. I'm going to do my way. 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 And they get burnt out on they learn like, oh, there's another way. All right.
Going
I'm going to
in
be.
circles.
Yeah. So then they have this pedal, the being, the being, rather than realizing it's not either or. It's like they're two pedals. And if you leverage both of them, where those concepts and those experiences and the way of being, like where the being, the doing intersect, that's where like someone's purpose and somebody's profits really start unlocking in a very natural way.
Love that analogy. That's really, really good. Just on the being piece, because for some people that might be a little bit esoteric, like, you know,
Sure,
how do we,
absolutely.
The doing is so ingrained in us, you know, it's so natural and especially for us entrepreneurial types, like many of us don't have issues with doing it. In fact, many of us need to really address this other side. So what are some practical things that people can do to tap into this being state, either in the relationships or things like that are going to directly affect the business?
So meditation is probably one of the simplest paths, and people probably have heard that before. And some people may have judgments around it of like, oh, so I got to get to an enlightenment. I'm in a place where it means nothing. It's nothing about getting anywhere. There's really a tool to start disciplining my mind and disciplining the minds of my clients. It's just like we're very familiar with going to we used to be, but pre-COVID, going to the gym and lifting heavy weights. Now maybe you're familiar with doing some type of fitness in your home or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so we understand like, okay, well, I'm going to go discipline my body because that's what's going to grow and expand my capacity in my body and help me optimize my health. But for whatever reason, we discount that same type of journey when it comes to disciplining our mind, where it's like, well, what's the point? Well, our mind either runs us or we run our mind. So meditation is the practical tool that allows us to start becoming aware of the space between the thoughts, where we allow ourselves to become to an awareness that, whoa, I'm the thinker of my thoughts. And oftentimes people who are caught up in doing, they're not aware of what even they're thinking. Like they're identifying with the thoughts that are running through their brain. And people who are entrepreneurs probably have an average of 400 to 600,000 thoughts a day. So if people are just like self-doubt, self-deprecation, like all of these are just like a way of this normalcy for them. When they meditate, they can start becoming aware of them and then detaching from it and then choosing which ones they want to give their focus to, which ones they just let pass by. And that's kind of one practical tip I would say is like meditation.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, one thing I've noticed with the meditation and a little bit with reading as well, actually, because this is a frequent suggestion, you know, that I've seen. And I've heard this common excuse from people is like, oh, well, how do I know if I'm doing it properly? Like, you know, how do I know, you know, what's the thing? And one suggestion from me that I found really helpful with meditation is like getting rid of all the expectations.
Yes.
And even because there's this myth as well in meditation that you have to like sit still and be like, peaceful, peaceful, peaceful.
Yeah.
And I've found that if you like just little things that you're allowed to move, you know, you don't have to be so rigid. You can move if you want to move. You can allow something to come into your head. Like there's no way to meditate necessarily And it's the same with reading, because I often read a lot and people pepper me with questions all the time. Like, oh, Ben, how do you retain so much information? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't really have that expectation on reading, to be honest. People are like, what? I'm just like, I think that's an important piece. And this is probably something that you've also taught me, AJ, is like to be detached whilst this being part, like all those expectations that we place, perhaps that's more of a doing area. Whereas these being things, it's more of like surrender, right? There's no formal way that we have to meditate, or there's no formal way that we have to do these things. And I think that's where the real challenge comes in for entrepreneurs, because we're so like, oh, I need to control my world. I need to build this thing. I need to create that structure. And to be, you actually have to do away with a lot of that stuff, which is very, very tricky for people.
So Jonathan Heston is somebody who's just a dear friend of mine, and he's helped me like co-found Project Shift and Uprising, and is just an amazing human being. Super like wizardly smart too. And so some of the stuff we have been deconstructing and done very successfully recently, since October, actually, since our last Uprising event in Australia, was realizing that a lot of entrepreneurs are going to a top of the mountain in resistance to something. Like typically, some of them may have stories of like, I do not want to be mediocre. Like if you're like, you're fucking average, they're like, no, I'm not. Do you not see everything I've created? And so their top of the mountain may be built in resistance to proving and defending and justifying that they're not mediocre. Another one may be like they're building something or going on a journey to create something to not be good enough or not be enough. And from that place, everything they're creating is actually in resistance to the not enoughness, the not good enoughness, right? So until they are able to be with, and you use the word surrender, so I'll use it because it's a great word for this, surrender to the experience of not being good enough or not being enough or being mediocre, then that thing is the thing that's doing them, and they're not doing it. And as a result, there's always a sense of internal pressure and internal angst. Kind of crazy. It's kind of a bit of a mind fuck on this one.
Yeah.
But if you can become aware of it and be with it, not at like a conceptual level of like, oh, let me cognitive like reframe. No, just go to the fucking pit and be with what you experience. Like, does it make you angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling terrified? And like being with it at a body sensation level. And then you start using breath work, because we lay a breath work on it, which you've experienced. The breath then takes them to a place where they're no longer resisting it, and where they're like, because I did this recently because I became aware like, oh, I'm terrified of being mediocre. So that was the thing I took into the pit, which was like, I'm terrified of being mediocre, and was with the fear, I was with the yelling and the primal, like this like savagery that came through me with that. And then the breath took me to a place that said, there's not a bone in your body that can be mediocre. And I was like, there's not a bone in my body that can be mediocre. And so now it's like, somebody's like, well, what's your holy cause? Or what's your why behind your why of what you're doing? And if we're really whole and complete, my philosophy currently is, this may change later, but currently at the time of this recording, you do it because you do it. Like there is no why. It's like, well, why do you choose to go up the mountain? Seems exciting to me. That's just what I want to do right now. It's the journey I choose. Because if I'm not able to get to that place, everything I'm doing is in resistance to something. And with that resistance, there's a payoff. I may be driven, but there's going to be a cost, which is going to be some internal angst. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they think, well, I need the fear. I need the wolf to chase me to go out and perform. And it's like, well, that's built your current existence up until now. There's another potentiality for you if you're open to taking the quantum leap, where you go out and do something because it's legitimately just an overflow of your purpose. Because at your core, at your essence, you are a creator. Like if we dive into a little bit of like Christian theology, we're made in the image of God. And if that is true, then that means I'm God and I'm always expanding and I'm always creating. It's just going to happen. Like it's just a natural evolution as being a human being. And I have not yet found a human being when they're returned to their essence, when they're returned to their core, that creation is not the natural byproduct of what they want to do.
Love that. Love that.
A lot to chew on there. A lot to chew on there.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. Really good. So another practical thing that I've noticed with entrepreneurs, so we've obviously had hundreds of conversations and clients and things over the years. One thing I've noticed, just to go back to that point, is really frequently there is a trauma or what I call the origin moment, and it changes form for people. Sometimes it's financial trouble in teenage years, or not feeling understood, or any of these sort of things. It's from my experience, it's typically from like 0 to 18, anywhere in that range. The interesting thing that I've seen is that you can almost look at a person's like their skills and their talents and the things that they're really amazing at today. And if you trail it back far enough, you can actually see that the origin is very frequently a trauma or an issue. So to go back to that point, I've seen direct evidence for this piece of we're trying to get away from that trauma as entrepreneurs. And it's like that weapon that we build, it helps us to create control. And I think what you're saying here, AJ, is like you get to a point where you have to consciously love that journey and not do it from a place of hate and like anger and all of these things. And at that point, you actually transition to like a different kind of frequency where you're actually dropping into a space of loving the journey and you become a more powerful creator. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah, totally. So Socrates, I believe, was the one who said the unexamined life isn't worth living. And so I think, a lot of people, we really don't examine. Now, the good news about us entrepreneurs is typically we do examine some things, right? Like we're open to thinking outside the box. But when it comes to these things that are really close to our heart, then oftentimes we're like, no. And then most entrepreneurs either justify or defend that thing rather than standing in the pocket and truly taking time to really examine their life. Because the reality is if like the current results that we have, whatever level they are, there's no right or wrong, whatever that level of results is a byproduct of our way of being and our way of doing currently. So if we have a new target and those results are things that we haven't experienced yet, the only way to create those in a sustainable manner is to be differently and to do things differently. And I haven't found a way yet, maybe I will, but I haven't yet, where the sustainable level of creation is created. It's not able to be created outside like examining every aspect of our life, like becoming the observer chooser and really asking ourselves, is this way of being, is this way of doing, is it empowering me to create my results or is it disempowering me? And if it's disempowering, then let's question it for the love of God and let's find a different way of being and doing so we can then step into that new sustainable reality rather than just like having a glimpse of it and then we're back down to our average, having a glimpse of it and then back down to our average. And they're like, this game's too hard. These people are wrong, right? But the people who do it sustainably, they really do, it seems like, examine everything. I had a question the other day because I just, my wife and I hired a parenting coach. Her name's Tiffany Nooning and she's amazing. She's fantastic. And so I'm examining my childhood and I've done a lot of childhood cleanup. But we went deeper. Like there's this layers to this game. And every time I examine like new layers of freedom, new levels of power. And the first question on the document was, did you feel loved as a child? It wasn't, were you loved? It said, did you feel loved as a child? So as I examined that and really sat with it, I was like, no, I didn't feel loved. I knew I was loved by my mom and dad. I had a great childhood. There's nothing wrong with it. But did I feel loved? I was like, no. I didn't. And like that one single question then like opened up a whole new level of awareness for me. And I think so oftentimes, just making my point here, we're scared to sit with some of those questions because like, well, then what will my mom think about, or my dad, or society, or my what? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's okay to examine things and pull back the curtains and layers and find what empowers you. And that's what allows us as entrepreneurs to actually have these quantum leaps and create a level of life that very few people experience.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, AJ. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Let's talk a bit about shift and drift, because I love this methodology, because what we're talking about is like kind of grounding some of the philosophies now, and then this shift and drift, or drift and shift methodology. Do you want to talk us through that and how that works?
Sure. So it was really kind of started out being derived from a concept called the upper limits concept that Gay and Katie Hendricks had proposed in The Big Leap and his second book that I don't remember off the top of my head. They're both fantastic reads. Highly recommend them. The Big Leap and whatever his other one is, something Genius, The Joy of Genius. That's what it was, The Joy of Genius. Both fantastic reads, really good books. So he talks about this concept, which is the upper limit, where everybody has essentially a thermostat setting on how good they can stand it, right? How good their marriage can be, how good business can be, how easy and simple making money can be. And the question of being a human is like, well, how good can we actually stand it? And so when life starts getting so good, we self-sabotage, because as like in our cells in our body, they all have little receptor sites for cortisol, right? And positive, the serotonin, I guess, or whatever the positive ones are. I'm not a scientist. I'm more of a spiritual guy. So just hang with me. And so when those cells duplicate, if we're addicted to stress, then the cells are like, well, I guess we need more receptors for stress. And so they start breeding and duplicating to absorb more stress. And so essentially how good we can stand it gets less and less and less and less and less and less and less. And if we're really starting to push the threshold of that and lean into it, then we're starting to shift. Like we're catching the drift. Like, oh, I hit my thermostat setting. I have an awareness of it. Let me shift into a place of power. And if we do that over time, then we start raising that thermostat setting of how good we can stand it. So that's what this idea of the drift is. So I believe that part of the game of being a human being is becoming aware of like, when are we hitting that threshold, that upper limit? And we're going to go into a drift, which is usually drama. Usually when we're in a drift, we're in drama. We're either in a hero archetype where we're like, oh, let me save you, or let me save myself. Or we're in a victim archetype with another human being or a self where we're like, oh, poor me. The world's out to get me. The marketplace is out to get me. My inner critic is out to get me. Or we're in the villain archetype, which is all about like the fuck you stories. It's like, fuck you clients, fuck you marketplace, fuck you business, fuck you God, fuck you government, fuck you inner critic. And like we just kind of run in the little triangle there using a massive amount of energy. And for as long as we continue operating in those three drama archetypes, we're in the drift. So the shift is becoming, number one, aware of like, oh, I'm in a drift. I'm either being a hero, I'm being a victim, I'm being a villain, whether that's to those outside of us or to ourselves, right? And then shifting back into our creative potential and getting back in control. So like if we're being the victim, it's like, oh, I'm being a victim. I'm in the poor me stories. How can I embrace the creator archetype of being a vulnerable problem solver? And so if we're in drama with another human, let's just pretend like we're in drama with a client and we're like, oh, that client, they're not doing this. Poor me. Don't they see everything I'm doing? We may reach out to a client and say, hey, there's a part of me that's feeling really sad, or I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling angry, whatever is the inarguable truth. And we're like, here's the context of what's going on. Here's some possibilities that I see of how we could move forward. How could you and I work together to resolve this? And we're holding potentiality like to get out of drama. And when that shift happens and they're like, oh, let's do possibility number one, we create a new agreement with the client where it's a win-win, and boom, we're out of the drift. So the game isn't like, okay, let's go on a journey where we will never, ever drift again. We will never, ever be in drama ever again. Like the drama is just a feedback mechanism. Like there's a piece of scripture in the Bible, I don't remember where it was. But essentially, Jesus said, "By their fruits ye shall know them." And my other favorite part of this, "and they shall know themselves." So if we buy into that philosophy, we can start seeing drama as nothing more than the feedback mechanism to see ourselves. Like, oh man, I'm being a victim right now. I'm being a little bitch. Let me just align with that truth and let me learn how to step into my creative power and embrace some of the creative archetypes and then shift out of the drift. And then the games becomes about like, okay, how fast can I become aware of when I'm in drama and shift out it? The faster and faster that we can do that, the faster and faster we start raising our upper limits. And things that used to like be in a drift for a month, man, we can cut down into weeks. Things that used to be a week, we can cut down into days. Things that used to take us into a drift for days, we cut down to minutes. Things that took minutes, we come into seconds. And we just start getting better and better and better at just identifying the drift and then shifting out of the drift. And that's what starts allowing us to create better and better and better and better, making more money, more freedom, etc.
So powerful. That one philosophy, like when you taught that to me originally, like that was such a big breakthrough for me personally. And it's crazy to think that this isn't, more well known in the industry, because it just causes so much like angst, pain, suffering. The really big one for me, which I think is quite common, is actually trying to kill the hero in yourself a little bit. Because what I found is, because my life was all about control, I want to learn everything. I want to know everything. I want to not be told what to do. Very kind of entrepreneurial in that sense. What ended up happening is, as soon as I got a certain number of clients, or as soon as I had a certain number of agreements, if someone kind of fell down to their knees in my environment, I would like quickly run over to them and like try and pull them back up, be like, come on, you got to come with me. Like, let's go. Like, and that was my energy all the time. And I'd played sports growing up. That was the way I played. If I saw someone down, I was like, come on, let's go. I was trying to hero people all the time.
Totally.
And what this actually led to was a really strange paradox that I had to overcome, where the people that I was trying to help the most were often the people who I would fall into drama with, and they would kind of throw stones at me. And that was my primary tailspin in business, in the team, in all of it. And it was like this unresolvable paradox. It's like, fuck, all these people who I'm trying so hard to help, like they don't appreciate me. And then I would fall into victim, and then I would fall into villain with these people. But actually the answer was to step back. And this was interesting because it was actually a high level of responsibility for me to step back and actually hold space for people to stand back up by themselves. Because when I tried to save them, that's when this whole process, and that's been like one of my primary pieces of work, I would say, for the last 2 years. And that one thing for me has had more of an impact than learning Facebook ads or writing better copy or like anything like that. Because the cost of those experiences, I had moments where, I would do a $50,000, $60,000 a month. And then the month afterwards, I would get in drama with someone and I would drop back down to like maybe 20 or 25. Like that is a massive, and it was usually due to one of these very strong, dramatic interactions with someone. So it's like crazy to think that little principle could add so much value to a business. And I think that is super common in terms of what I see people heroing others.
Totally, because they have a success equation that's kind of ingrained of like, I'll be worthy, I'll be awesome, I'll be successful when I have X, Y, or Z. And so then when the client isn't doing the thing, then they're like, I need to go save them, because if I don't save them, they don't get results. And like their worthiness is caught up in the results rather than embracing the creative archetype, which is like being the caring respecter, where we can become aware of our tendency to want to go save. But the problem with us wanting to step in as the hero or the savior is saviors always get crucified, like they have forever through time. And it's not going to be any different for you and I. Like it's going to happen. And I've had this tendency as well. And to this day, still do, if I'm not careful, and stay like at the gate of my mind to realize like, oh, dropping down into that, hey, let me help you energy, rather than being like, hey, I care about you. I really appreciate you. I see what you're doing. I see how much potential you have. Here's how I can help you. Here's how I can guide you. Here's the skill sets I can bestow upon you. Do you want some guidance? Do you want some assistance? And if they're like, I just really need you to do it for me. I need you to save me. I'm like, good luck with that. I'm not willing to be crucified. I've been poked too many times. So good luck on your journey. When you want to be guided, I'm here for you. Like, I can still respect them. I can respect them. I can respect myself. And like you said, it frees up so much energy. And the thing is like, it allows the business owner, and you probably experience this right now, Ben, is when you like draw a line in the sand and like commit to like being the caring respecter, which is what I would call the creator archetype. If the drama archetype is hero, the creator archetype is the caring respecter. When you commit to that, and sometimes again, we may find ourselves in hero, so we just recommit. Commitment is a process of recommitment. But when we commit to that, what happens is we level up and the clients level up. Our team members level up, and we just start working with, like, I don't know, people call them A players. Like, they're just amazing human beings who are taking responsibility, who are speaking their inarguable truth. And this is just where the game of business just becomes a lot more easeful, because you're not just dragged down by like drama. Like, oh, it's so heavy. Because it's because of bullshit drama.
Love it. So there's three ways, isn't there? Well, there's three primary archetypes that are kind of like I wouldn't say the antithesis, but the way to stick out of that. So you've got the caring respecter that we just mentioned, the vulnerable problem solver. Do you want to talk us through that one as well?
Yeah. So the vulnerable problem solver is anytime we're easily finding ourselves in being a victim, right? Whether it's being a victim to ourselves or being a victim with other people. So that's all about the poor me stories. Oh, poor me, poor me, poor me. So if we're taking responsibility, we will lean into our courage and we'll become the vulnerable problem solver, where we'll speak our inarguable truth. Our inarguable truth is what are we experiencing? Like, and there's like, dude, there's levels to this game. Because it's one thing to be like, yo, I'm feeling some sadness. It's another level to be like, man, I'm feeling some constriction in my throat right now. Feeling some sadness. I'm feeling unseen. Like being vulnerable. And then like being a problem solver. We're not just speaking like, I'm feeling this way, but we're also leaning into our ability to lead and be like, so here's what's going on without blame or shame. Like, here's the context of what's going on. And then really brainstorming and being like, here's a potential I see that we could do to get a result. Here's another potential I see. And then opening up the space, the possibility for the person to co-create with us. We're like, how could you and I work together to resolve this? It's one of my favorite, like anytime there's conflict with self or conflict with another human being, CPR, context, possibility, resolution. Like that framework has made me so much money. It has eliminated so much stress in my life. It's simple to do, simple not to do. And so that's how we start becoming or being the vulnerable problem solver and getting out of drama. But the problem with this is most people don't want to do that. But because to do that, their way of being currently comes down to two things. It comes down to they're either attempting to avoid being dominated by their responsibility, or they're attempting to avoid the vulnerability of intimacy. So what I mean by this, we came in and we're like, oh, I don't know if I can be that vulnerable. I don't know if I can lead with that much like integrity and just like rawness. It's because you're attempting to avoid the vulnerability of intimacy because you're afraid if you like do that, they're going to be like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Are you weird? Like, you fucking sensitive? Man up, dude. Like, that's like oh man, I'm going to be rejected. And like, it goes back, like you talked to childhood or to events and our teens or early or even yesterday or right now, where we had some feedback where people are like, what are you, a pussy? You need to man up, right? Or whatever. We're like, oh, I don't ever want to be that vulnerable because this is where I was rejected. This is where my heart was hurt. So part of this is being able to come home and being able to source our own love, source our own trust and respect. But if we really want life to be awesome, then anytime we're starting to feel that resistance of like, I don't know if I want to be that vulnerable, to take a deep breath and lean into that, because that's where the goodness is going to happen. But a lot of people are afraid to go there, but that's where the goodness starts to happen.
Nice. And what about the villain? How do we shift out of villain?
So the villain is all about, the fuck you stories. So the way we shift out is being the empathetic aggressor. So if somebody's like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, you look at like scripture and like, well, turn the other cheek. Jesus turned the other cheek. I always tell people, I'm not Jesus. I'm Anthony AJ Amyx. And you poke a snake long enough, it will bite you. Okay. So I can use my words to be like, hey, you're pushing a threshold here. And I love myself enough to say, please do not cross this boundary any longer. Right. And so I can be like, look, maybe you're being triggered because of whatever. Like I can have some empathy. I really can empathize with them. Like if I can imagine putting myself in their shoes, walking their life, I could have some empathy for them. But then I also can say, this isn't a win for me, like line in the sand. Now, what I found oftentimes in this game of entrepreneurship, Ben, is that we go like from hero, right? Or we're in victim, the poor me. And if you're anything like me, and the majority of the people I coach, they spend like a nanosecond in the victim because they're like, I don't want to be in that poor me stories, because they used to be that. They then were like, fuck this, I've had enough. They step into radical responsibility. They're into phase 3 of life. Life happens by me. And they're then trying to control. So they spend nanoseconds in the victim and they're like, right down into villain, right? And so where the goodness happens for entrepreneurs and high achievers is when we catch ourselves in villain, is to pause and back up a little bit and be willing to admit the truth of like, I'm being a victim. I didn't spend much time there, but that's where it started before I swung into villain. So we can resolve the things if we'll just back up a little bit and admit the truth of like, man, I'm being a victim. I'm being the thing. I'm resisting the thing I don't want to be. I'd rather be the villain. At least there's a little dopamine and ego hit in that one. But to like get back into the victim where we don't want to be, and then again, coming back to being the vulnerable problem solver, that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where we start reducing the conflict, handling the conflict, creating win-win agreements, and actually leading our clients and our team very powerfully.
Wow. That connects a lot, actually. I had an experience last month with a person that I was working with for Facebook ads, and I wasn't really getting the value. And I was just like, oh, you know what? And I said, look, I think I'm going to drop out. And that was about a week, and my card got charged like a week later. And I was pretty pissed off. Like I was pretty pissed off. But the personal development in me, immediately I had to start looking for the benefits. I'm like, okay, like what's the reason that this happened? And I'm doing all this personal development work. And it's funny because I think I did exactly what you just mentioned, just bypassing through the victim. So perhaps none of these stages are like good or bad necessarily. Like you say, they're like feedback mechanisms. But one thing I'm noticing is like I jumped out of victim and I was like, I don't refund. I've never refunded. No way I'm going to refund. Fuck that. And I almost like turned into hero because I was like, oh, I'm just going to punch through this. Like whatever, I can't be hurt sort of thing. Can't hurt me. And it's interesting because it kind of put me off for a week or two. I felt this kind of lagging, like I was obviously in drama around it. So that's an interesting one. I'll definitely be careful of that. Like trying to drop into that space and just feeling that's the being, right? Like being, because I fell into doing of, oh yes, must personal development my way out of this.
Totally.
As opposed to like, oh, okay, why am I feeling like that? Can I breach the topic? Can I go down that path?
Exactly. And so if you backed up and let's call this person George, and we could have been like, hey, George, saw my credit, like just go CPR. I saw my credit card got charged. There's a part of me that is really frustrated right now. In fact, I'm really pissed off. Like, this is the truth. Like, you're frustrated and you're pissed off. You can be with it. And then be like, so here's a couple of things that I see how we could resolve this. Number one, I don't want to move forward together. And I'm going to call my credit card company since we had an agreement that we weren't going to charge it. I'm going to charge back. That's a potentiality. Number two is like you and I can hop on the phone and we can figure out how to actually create a win that's going to serve me and serve you since you've already charged my card for the next 30 days. And then we'll talk about next steps moving forward. I would prefer, if it was 2, and you could be like, I prefer option number 2. How can you and I work together to resolve this? Or if it was number 1, I prefer option number 1. It could be that. Or number 3 is like, you refund my money. But either way, like you're getting back into creatorship and you're trusting your ability to lead. But see, the problem here in the Western world, and God, for the sake of God, America's getting terrible right now of like, oh, well, it's not politically correct. You're going to be too hard. Fuck off. Like there's a way to wield our truth and speak our truth, and arguably from a place of unconditional love that's not meeting all of these bullshit politically correct things. There's actually a way to still lead with love. When I'm just saying, I'm really frustrated right now.
Yeah.
It's just the truth. It's just the truth. And I found the more vulnerable I am and the more I lead like this, man, A-level clients are so grateful. Like they respond fast, they find solutions, and they're just like, man, I've never had anybody communicate with me this way. Thank you so much. Like they have so much more trust and respect. But the thing is it's scary to lead in that way, because it's really putting our ass on the line. It's really opening us up, and we're really being vulnerable. Like that's really leading in and like trying to avoid that intimacy piece, right? Because it's like, well, what if they think I'm a dick? What if they think I'm an asshole? What if that, like, it's all this bullshit again. But until we're willing to lean into that edge and adopt that new way of being and doing, then we do still play and we drift in drama.
I'm learning a lot on this podcast. This is fantastic. I'm loving this. That's deepened for me because I probably haven't mastered because I'm getting good at CPR now. I can definitely do CPR. I love that. It's so powerful, but only probably in one of those areas, I would say, as opposed to the other 2. So that's I'll get back to you on that. See what I can do.
I learned something at this marriage retreat this past weekend. Like we all have essentially 4 fear signatures, right? Every human does. And if we're in fear, then there's no way that we're going to create anything but fear. And that's totally like in accordance with the law of being. And for the listeners, so you know, the law of being states that the world will give you exactly that which you are at your core consisting of the thoughts and feelings you're holding on to predominantly. So if somebody's giving you some feedback and your fear signature is to like fight, where you're like, what are you saying about me? Come on, you want something like that? Like, we're just going to create an argument, more chaos, more fighting. If our fear signature is to freeze, we're like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to hurt them. I don't know what to, and we're just freezing while we're still withholding. And so that's a hero move, by the way. So we're still going to feel resentful over time. At some point in time, if we don't unfreeze, we're going to swing into victim, and then we're going to swing into villain really hardcore. If our fear signature is to run away, like, just fuck it, I'm going to cancel my credit card and just let the things go by. And we run away. Well, that's going to happen. That's a fear. That's a hero move too. I don't want to rock the boat too much. I'll just do the easy thing and be like, cancel the credit card. Now you right. Passive aggressive bullshit. Or somebody may just like faint, where there's like get to apathy. We're like, it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, like I have the money in the bank. This is what it is. Fuck it. Right. Apathy. 4 signatures. I would call the faint like appease. So we have fight, flight, flee, appease, right? So when we can identify like, man, there's a bit of me that wants to go to war right now. Like we can transmute that fear and be with the fear. And there was 4 fear melters that I learned. One of those fear melters was this idea of like melting. So if I'm in fight, then I'm just going to like say what's the truth. I'm like, oh, they charged me again. Oh, they're so terrible. How dare they do it? Like, and it changes like our emotional response from defensiveness into just being like the observer chooser, but we're doing it through moving our body, which then is getting us out of our amygdala and back into our cognitive thinking brain, where we can actually start reducing conflict consciously. Is this making sense, Ben?
Yeah, it does.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If we're finding ourselves like frozen, we're like, then we just like move, like just literally move your body, like, and just like move. And what that does is, again, is it gets us out of defensiveness, and it opens up our ability to get back into our ability as human beings, which I think is one of our greatest gifts, which is agency, our ability to figure out how we're going to respond. We're no longer reacting. We're like, feeling some fear, freezing. I'm going to move it. all right, how can I be the vulnerable problem solver? And bam, we're back into power where we can create. If we're finding ourselves wanting to run away, then it's like legitimately adopting a sumo stance in our body where we're like planting our feet like a sumo, like I'm not going anywhere. And like thinking, all right, vulnerable problem solver. How can I be the vulnerable problem solver? And if we're finding ourselves wanting to appease and go into apathy, then it's almost like melting again, where it's like, oh, I'm such a victim. I just don't want to do anything. I just want to sit in my pit of apathy. I don't want to rock the boat. And by just moving and being with it again, we're back into using our cognitive thinking to create consciously. This was a game changer for me. I just learned this over the past weekend. And so what this has done, like just for me inside my marriage currently, because I did this morning, I took care of Zyra for like 4 hours or something of that nature while Sarah was working. And she came out after I put Zyra to bed for her nap. And she was like, did you feed her? Did you do this? Did you do this? And she was like throwing tennis balls of questions at me. Pa, 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 pa. And there was a part of me who has a wound of not being seen from my childhood where I'm like, did you not see that I put her to bed and that she's alive and we played and we did all these things? And there's a part of me that wants to fight. So I became aware of it and I was like, oh, I feel like such a terrible husband and a dad right now. And I just like melted and like it totally diffused it. And Sarah was like, oh, yeah, you're being amazing. Can I give you a hug? And I was like, yeah. So then she just like hugged me. She's like, you're an amazing father. You're an amazing dad, which then like gave me what I wanted. And then we could co-create really fast. And that type of thing inside our marriage used to like totally derail us for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And that was boom, within seconds by using this little fear melter. So coming inside the game of business, these things can be used. Like you get an email from a client, you get a text message from a client, you get a phone conversation from a client, and you're like, I'm going to fight, or I'm going to run, I'm going to freeze. Like you could just use some of this somatic like body movement and then using and figuring out, okay, I'm trying to be hero or I'm trying to be victim or wherever, vulnerable problem solver, caring respecter. And this is like becoming super ninja shit. Aware of the drift, boom, shifting. Aware of the drift, boom, shifting. Because anytime we essentially are in fear, we're entering the drift. Because really at the end of the day, there's two states, fear or love and service. That's it. And if we're ever in fear, like even if we're angry about something, the root of it is we're afraid of something. That's not true. Let me fight and prove, right? Or if we're sad, we're like, oh, something's been lost from me. And if that happens, then this is going to, like the root is fear, right?
Yeah.
And so all drifts are just like a drift of fear. We become aware of it. We can shift out of the fear and back into our creatorship and using some of the things we're talking about today to like start creating win-wins.
That's huge. That is massive. Getting into the body is, I think, something we can all work on, right? Especially entrepreneurial types. I know for myself, boom, straight into the head. It's like, that's my number one problem solving mechanism is I will just completely leave my body. But what you're saying is like grounding yourself in the body before you go into the mind can dissolve some of the charge, which I
totally. And one of the phrases they used this past weekend, and I'm glad you brought this up, is lots of entrepreneurs and high performing people, their fear signature is flee, but it's not flee like I'm going to run away. It's flee up, flee into the mind. Like let me cognitively process and think through all of this stuff. And
yeah.
But it really is, I'm fleeing to my brain because that's where I'm comfortable rather than being like, oh no, let me get and be in my body right now, right? Like get back here where we actually have access to some massive amounts of intelligence and wisdom to be able to create.
Love it. AJ, this has been very, very enjoyable. Thank you so much. I've actually learned a lot. I've deepened my wisdom, which I value very highly. So thank you. Appreciate you. How can people reach out to you? How can they get more of these philosophies into their life?
So I have a digital book called Mindset is Not Enough. People can go grab that thing for free, the entire book, not like the chapter, but the entire book over at ajamyx.com/book. So it's ajamyx.com/book. I'd say that's probably the best thing because it'll kind of really walk us through how mindset, it really isn't enough. Like it's great. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful tool, but it legitimately is not enough if we're truly committed to purpose, profits, and freedom. There's a whole lot more. And this body set has a lot of intelligence to give us.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.